recently that I don't really make any use of my YouTube channel. I've had it for years and I only ever upload blogs and they're link only, so only a few people get to see them. Anybody who knows me from other platforms will know that I'm quite a creative person. I like to make things, I like to sew, I'm into photography, art, Photoshop, and I feel like I could use my YouTube channel to show some of that off, show you guys what I do for fun. So with that in mind, I recently moved house and it's a vast improvement on my old flat. If anybody's ever seen pictures from my old flat, yeah, this place has got normal sized ceilings. So yeah, there's that for a start. But it does get a bit drafty. We've got quite a few doors that have got quite big gaps underneath them, which is great for cabling and getting Ethernet cable to other rooms in here, but not that great on a cold night. So I've decided that I'm going to make a draught excluder. And because it's me, it's not going to be just any old draught excluder, it's going to be a Beetlejuice Sandworm draught excluder. So I always have bits and bobs material wise lying around, and I had a bunch of black and white fleece, so I'm thinking this is going to work quite well for the body. So I'll do that, just do alternate black and white stripes in a long tube. And for the detail work, like the mouths, the eyes, that kind of thing, I have got some felt. Right, I've done this little sketch just to kind of map out what it is I want to do. So for the small details like the eyes and the teeth and stuff, I'm going to be using the felt. I've also got some fabric pens which I'll be able to use to draw the little stripes on the teeth and also do the red dots on this one. For the tongue, I'm going to do basically the same thing as I'm going to do for the body, just on a much smaller scale. For these bits going around here, I know that there's some stuff that you can get which is like piping or something, which is basically designed for that kind of thing, but I couldn't remember what it's actually called, and Google wasn't really helping me very much, so I've decided it's going to be easier to just make my own using some cord, wrapping it around the felt and then just stitching it along the line. So construction wise, I am winging it, but I'm thinking to get the kind of shapes that I want, I need to cut out this kind of shape, put some darts in places just to give it a little bit more shape. So the body's going to be reasonably easy to do, that's basically just a tube that tapers. I'm sure I'll be able to find some precise calculations for that online. I'm thinking it's probably going to end up being about a metre and a half long, and I just need to stitch the black and white stripes together. So I'll do that first, and I'll also do this bit with the green felt and the cord as well, because that's just a straight line. And then I'll do some mock-ups of the actual heads themselves, and I'll get back to you after I've done that. Definitely don't take this as a tutorial in any way, shape or form. My experience is more with making clothes and stuff. I've only ever made a few like kind of plush toy type things, and that was using a proper pattern. So yeah, I am very much winging it. It could end up being a disaster. We shall see. I decided to start off with the green bits because they were the easiest. I did this by dividing the felt into sections, cutting the pieces out and clipping the felt around the cord. I used zipper foot to sew the pieces together so I could get as close to the cord as possible. Don't ask me why I'm holding the felt at the back. For some reason I think it gives me more control. It probably doesn't. I messed up and didn't realise my memory card was full, so I've not got all of the footage of me making the pattern for the body. Basically I measured out the length that I wanted on some wrapping paper and then made 2 lines in a cone shape. I used wrapping paper because it's got a handy grid on the back and it's cheap. I divided my very long cone into equal sections, then cut them out to use as pattern pieces. I laid out the pattern pieces alternately on the black and white fleece, cut the pieces out and then stitched them together. Okay, so it's actually a few days later now and I wasn't able to get as much done as I would have liked to, just because knackered. But I did get the body done and so I have stuffed that. So my plan now is going to be to just basically crack on. One thing that is worrying me though is when I was cutting out the green felt, it did kind of feel like I might not have quite enough. We'll see. I may end up having to take a little trip out. But anyway, I will do another update when I have done some more and I've actually got some more stuff to show you. I started mapping out the pattern for the outer head, but it quickly dawned on me that I'm an idiot. There's no way the pattern that I drew up was ever gonna work. Then I realised that the answer to my problem had been staring me in the face the whole time. Using my bag as a guide, I started a new pattern which consisted of 3 pieces, 2 side pieces and 1 that went down the middle. I did a mock-up using some scrap from my cabbage patch before even thinking about touching the fleece, just to make sure I was on the right track. Next, I cut out the black stripe that goes behind the outer head. This is the one that's got the kind of fin thing on top, so I cut out 2 strips of fleece, one with extra seam allowance that was going to be cut in half and sandwiched the fin bit, and one that was slightly shorter to go on the bottom. For the fin, I drew out the design on some paper to use as a pattern for both the fleece and the interfacing. I ended up using 2 pieces of interfacing because I felt like it just wasn't quite stiff enough with just one. The fleece pieces were then sewn together and sandwiched between the 2 smaller fleece pieces that I cut out. Then I stitched the whole thing to the head. I also stitched together the outer head pieces. Next, I drew up a pattern for the interior of the mouth. This was then cut out using red felt. I stitched the green piping around the border of the headpieces. It probably would have been quicker to also stitch the mouth interior to it as well, but it looked a bit too complicated for me. By the time I got to the eyes, it had gotten dark, so the lighting was crap. For the eyes, I cut out 2 circles from the red felt and then stitched them on using a buttonhole stitch. I think that's the stitch that I used. I could be wrong. I thought it looked good anyway. In a lot of my picture references, there was a dark border around the eyes. This was either shadow or just a stylistic choice on some of the more cartoony pictures, so that's why I used black cotton. At this point, I also stitched the mouth interior to the head and then stitched the head to the body. My next challenge was the teeth. I cut out a bunch of triangles from my white felt and stitched them together to form little cones. These were then turned inside out, stuffed and stitched onto the mouth. I did give myself some little guide dots, but somewhere along the way I seem to have ignored them. To finish off the teeth, I used some black fabric markers to draw some little stripes on them. I cut out 4 stripes from the black fleece to do some stripes on the head. This was totally a stylistic choice and not because I forgot that the head was supposed to be stripy. These were then pinned on, faffed with a lot, and then stitched onto the head using a back stitch. Okay, so update time. As you can see, we are in the comfort zone. It is PJs all day, every day, because I am exhausted. But we do have more of a sandworm. You've already seen the body, but this is where we are up to with the head. So, to be honest with you, I am pretty pleased with how things are looking so far. With the teeth, I'm happy with how the fabric pens went. I think that looks quite good. The angle though, they seem to kind of splay out a bit. So I might have to put some stitches in just to kind of force them back to being straight. But I'll worry about that more once I've got the inner head in there. Other things to do on this part, I just need to finish off that bit of green going around there, because we now have felt. I've also added some little yellow dots to the eyes, because from a lot of the reference images that I was using, it was from like the cartoon and like plush toys that other people have made and stuff, and they didn't have this. But then when I went back and looked at some stills from the film, they did, so I've added them in. This also led me to discover something, because I don't really want to make the teeth like this for the inner head, because there's a lot more of them on the inner one and these were quite fiddly to make. But this felt is kind of really flimsy, and the only interfacing I've got is black, so that's not going to work very well for doing white teeth. But when I was originally shopping for my materials and stuff, in the craft shop they didn't have any red or white felt. I'm assuming because getting near Christmas now, everybody just decided that they were going to do their Christmas craft projects. So I went into the cheap shit shop a couple of doors down, and they had this. It's rubbish. Like the quality is in no way comparable, but this could actually work in my favour because it's quite stiff, so it could end up actually working quite well for the teeth. We'll see. I don't want to jinx myself. I do have some just normal white stuff if it doesn't work, but I thought it was worth playing with, worth having an experiment with. So I've not got that much to do now, so hopefully I will get this finished soon. Pattern wise for the head, I'm just going to use the same one that I used for this one and just shrink it down a little bit. I'm still amazed that it took me that long to figure out that my original pattern for the head wasn't going to work. I've literally had a pattern for like a head like this shape for months and months now, so anyway, once I've got the green on the outside of this, I'll be able to finish stuffing this area more, and then I can see exactly what kind of angles we've got to play with, whether I'm going to have to take any material out of the bottom here or anything to make it look right when the mouth's open. Another thing that I probably should have thought about in advance was actually not stitching on the head until I got these bits done. Yeah. So I will probably catch you at the end of the video now for a conclusion to see how the finished product looks. So see you in a bit. I wanted the mouth of the inner head to have gums surrounding the teeth, so I cut my pink felt into strips to go either side of the teeth. For the teeth I used the cheap white felt. I cut it into a zigzag pattern, making sure to leave some seam allowance. I made some new green piping to fill in the gaps on the outer mouth, as well as some for the inner mouth. I then stitched the pink felt to the teeth and then attached the green piping and the inner mouth section. I decided to stitch the inner mouth pieces to the headpiece by hand, because by this point it was getting a bit complicated and super bulky and difficult to work with. I cut down some of the seam allowances to try and make things a bit easier, and I tried to tidy it all up by whip stitching it all together. Like the green piping on the outer mouth, there also wasn't quite enough for the inner mouth, so I had to attach some extension pieces. I attached these to the lower jaw first and then used them to connect the lower jaw to the upper jaw. I ended up with quite a bit of tidying up to do because there were a few gaps as well as pieces where I'd had to seam rip. For the tongue, I decided to try making it out of both fleece and felt to see which one would work best. I started off using the machine but switched to hand sewing down the length so I had more control. I then cut down my seam allowance and turned it right way out. The fleece one was able to turn right way out okay, so I went with that instead of felt. I also wanted it to have a bit more structure, so I tried inserting pipe cleaners first, but they wouldn't go in. Luckily, I did have some garden wire and that worked quite well. The tongue was then secured inside the mouth. I'm just doing a little test with a fabric pen on the fleece material, just to see how well it transfers, because with the felt it picked up the loose fibres quite a bit. It made it look a little bit messy, which was fine for the teeth because when you look at the film stills they did look a little bit dirty, but with the spots I want them to be a bit cleaner. So I'm just going to see what this is like. If it doesn't work, then we may have to do some spots cut out of felt and sewn on. But let's just see. not sure if you can see that, hang on. Yeah, as I suspected, it's picking up the fibres. So I'm getting a little bit of bleed, but it's not actually too bad. It's just got a little bit of a fuzzy border. It's not like with the felt where I get a little bit... Yeah, like the difference being with the felt, you couldn't really get it to properly sink in and get to the bottom layers, but this seems to work okay.
I cut out a piece of white felt for the back of the head and then secured it in place using a backstitch. I then started work on the eyes for the inner head. These were cut out of yellow felt using red felt for the pupils. They were then stitched onto the head. The two heads were then stitched together. It was at this point that I realised I would have to take it in quite a bit around the neck and do quite a bit of adjusting and stuff to make them fit together nicely. And finally, I added some details using the fabric pens. So, we got there in the end. It ended up taking a little bit longer than I expected it to. But, you know what, I'm really pleased with the results. Especially considering I've never made anything like this before. Obviously, there was the little thing with the pattern not quite working out. I ended up having to change what I originally intended. Also, as you can see, I ended up having to change this part because, and I should have seen that coming really, that in order to have the outer head open, I wouldn't be able to have this bit straight. So, but again, figured it out. I think also there was the not realising soon enough that there wasn't going to be quite enough of the green. Again, if I'd realised in advance, I would have been able to sew it all together as one big long one instead of having to piece it together while it was already sewn in. Other things, the teeth on the inside, I do wish I'd managed to figure out a way to make them angled downwards instead of going outwards. I did try kind of stitching the pink bit together, but I kind of feel like that's something that maybe if I'd machine stitched the pink bit properly flat around the teeth, then maybe that would have worked better, because yeah, you can kind of see that because you can kind of see that it's flatter here than I wanted it to be pinched in. I did try sewing it once it was constructed, but I think I ended up in a situation where I had too many layers, it was far too thick, and my hand stitching just wasn't strong enough. I probably could have physically stitched it stronger, but the cotton probably would have snapped under the pressure of all the bulk of the fabric. Obviously, I did have my little hiccup on the outer head with forgetting that it was supposed to be stripy. So this has ended up being a bit of a bumpy head. Again, if I'd thought in advance as well, I wouldn't have stitched the whole of the body together. I would have left myself a hole so that I could stuff everything together. But on the other hand, there are other things that I am really happy with. I'm really happy with how the fabric pens turned out. I think the teeth look really good on this, and I think the detail work on the head here has turned out really, really nicely. I also liked that I was able to put a bit of wire in the tongue. I did have a moment of worry where I was thinking that the tongue would be too thin and like I won't be able to physically stitch it out of the materials that I had, and I really didn't want to be kind of having a big mismatch of materials, like having to use like a thin cotton just to do one bit. So I'm really happy that that worked. The eyes I'm really happy with as well. And yeah, just generally the whole thing I'm really happy with. It's been sat on the top of our sofa for the past few days since I finished it. I kind of feel like it's too nice to use as a draft excluder now. Like, I don't want it to just be left on the floor. I kind of feel like it needs to be on display somewhere. But I think we probably will end up using it at some point, maybe in the bedroom. But yeah, I'm really happy with it, and this was a really, really fun build. Like I say, I've never made anything like this before. I think for a first time, it's not too bad. But yeah, so this has been really fun. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, I'd really appreciate it. I am open to any comments, any suggestions for things that you'd like to see, things you think I could have done better. This is my first video, so it's very much a learning curve. If you'd like to see more of me attempting to make things, then feel free to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!